In silent halls where shadows weep, a secret heart begins to beat. Soft whispers dance on candlelight. She kneels in prayer with gilded eyes, yet dreams of lips that dare to sigh. Forbidden vows, a daily guilt, a love that blooms where saints once knelt. Oh, carry me beyond these walls, where secret longing softly calls. In sacred hush our souls collide.
The bells of the convent echoed through the misty dawn. That sound, meant to summon the sisters to prayer, now rang like a lament over the stone courtyards of Santa Margherita. Upon the cold flagstones lay a motionless body. The white habit, once a symbol of purity and devotion, was now stained with blood. In the silent corridors no one dared to speak, yet everyone knew that something unholy had happened within those sacred walls. Few in the city of Monza could imagine that behind those iron gates, beneath the songs of devotion, a secret had been festering, one capable of defying the very authority of the church itself. To understand how such scandal could be born in a place dedicated to virtue, we must go back, far back, to a Europe caught between faith and fear. It was the late 16th century. Lombardy, the rich northern province of Italy, was under Spanish rule. The Habsburg crown had extended its reach not only into armies and treasuries, but into the conscience of its people. Across Europe, the Catholic Church was fighting to rebuild its dominion after the shattering force of the Protestant Reformation. The era of the Counter-Reformation had begun, a time when faith was measured not by love, but by obedience. Convents for women, once seen as refuges for souls devoted to God, had become fortresses of control. Behind their walls, noble families locked away their daughters, not to protect them from the world, but to protect the family fortune from being divided by marriage dowries. To send a daughter to the convent was not merely an act of piety, it was an act of economics. One less marriage meant one less dowry to pay, one less claim to inheritance. The church accepted this arrangement. It gained new brides for Christ and maintained its influence. The nobility gained savings and prestige. Only the young women lost everything. Among them was Virginia de Leyva. Born in 1575 into one of Lombardy's most powerful families, her father, Count Martin de Leyva, was a man of ambition and cold logic. To him, love was a distraction, freedom a danger, and daughters were chess pieces to be placed strategically. When Virginia reached the age of 13, the age when most children still dreamed of running through gardens and dancing at court, her father made his decision. She would take the veil. There was no discussion, no plea. The girl's tears meant nothing. Her destiny was sealed with a signature and a blessing. The silks of nobility were stripped away, replaced by coarse linen. The laughter of the household vanished, replaced by the echoing silence of stone. The convent of Santa Margherita loomed above Monza like a fortress of discipline. It had been built not to inspire joy, but to command fear. Its walls were thick enough to block the world, and its iron gates closed like a sentence. Life inside followed a rhythm older than memory. The bells at dawn, the chants before sleep, and in between the endless hours of submission. The day began before sunrise with prayers that blurred into exhaustion. Knees ached on cold stone floors. The air smelled of wax, incense, and dampness. Silence was law, broken only by the crack of discipline or the whisper of confession. For the nuns, each breath was a test of obedience. For the young novices, each moment was a lesson in forgetting who they once were. Virginia tried to pray, she tried to surrender her will, but every time she closed her eyes she saw the world she'd lost. The gardens, the dances, the sunlight on silk, and within her something small but defiant refused to die. It was the memory of freedom, the hunger to be seen not as a vessel of sin, but as a living soul. In her letters, those that would later be used as evidence, she wrote of loneliness so deep that even prayer could not fill it. She spoke of nights when the silence of the convent pressed upon her chest like a weight, when the flicker of a candle became a companion more faithful than faith itself. For Virginia, the convent was not a sanctuary. It was a tomb built by the living. And yet in that tomb, life continued, secret, forbidden, and unstoppable. The walls that were meant to contain virtue often became mirrors reflecting its opposite. Repression breeds rebellion. And within those walls young women whispered of the world beyond, of the taste of freedom they had never known. They shared dreams like contraband, passing them in glances, in sighs, in the softest touch of a hand during prayer. It was in this garden of silence and shadows that tragedy began to bloom. One afternoon, during Mass at the church attached to the convent, Virginia lifted her gaze. Across the nave stood a man, young, noble, and impossibly confident. His name was Gianpaolo Osio. He was known in Monza for his charm and his arrogance, for the easy way he moved between scandal and admiration. He was everything the convent forbade, everything Virginia had been denied. Their eyes met, once, briefly, as the choir sang the Sanctus. But in that fleeting second, something ancient and dangerous awoke, a spark, a memory of being alive. At first Virginia resisted the thought, but the thought resisted back. Days passed, then weeks. Then came the letters, at first cautious, then desperate. Tiny scraps of parchment hidden inside prayer books passed through the hands of servants or slipped between the folds of altar cloth. Words became touch, touch became fire, and fire became the secret heart of their existence. The chronicles speak of midnight meetings in the convent gardens, of doors unlocked by trembling hands, of vows broken beneath the eyes of stone saints. It was love, or madness, or both. To Virginia, it was the first taste of life since childhood. To Osio, it was conquest and danger wrapped in sanctity. Every kiss was a rebellion, every whisper was a crime. But secrets, like flowers, cannot bloom forever in the dark. The other nuns began to notice the change, the distracted prayers, the sudden absences, the small glow in Virginia's eyes. Among them was a young novice named Caterina, who watched too closely and spoke too little. Some say she pitied Virginia, others say she was jealous. What is certain is that Caterina learned more than she should have. Soon whispers turned to warnings, and one night Caterina disappeared. They said she fell down the stairs. They said it was an accident, but the bloodstains told another story. The chronicles of the trial, centuries later, would call it an unfortunate incident. Yet in Monza everyone understood what had happened. The first sin had been desire. The second was silence bought with death. For a time the convent returned to its quiet routine. The bells rang, the prayers continued. But beneath that surface of sanctity, guilt and fear had begun to rot the foundation. Virginia's secret grew heavier. Her body changed. Hidden beneath the folds of her habit, the unmistakable signs of pregnancy began to show. The miracle of life had become proof of her damnation. Those who helped her, servants, nuns bound by friendship or fear, swore oaths of secrecy. They delivered the child in silence, under candlelight, while the rest of the convent slept. No one knows what became of that baby. Some say he was sent away, others that he died before dawn. His existence, like his mother's sin, was meant to vanish into history. But secrets have echoes. And soon the echo reached the ears of the church. When word of the scandal began to spread, it was as though the walls themselves whispered. Monza trembled with rumour. Who was guilty? The nun, the lover, or the institution that had buried them alive together? Virginia, the girl who had once been forced to wear the veil of devotion, now wore another veil. The whispers spread like wildfire through Monza. Inside taverns, in marketplaces, even within the pews of churches, people spoke of the nun who had defied heaven itself. At first, it was disbelief, a tale too scandalous to accept. But curiosity is a faster preacher than faith. And soon, the city's silence turned into a choir of rumours. They said she had loved a man within the house of God. They said she had killed to keep her secret. They said she had borne a child within the walls of the convent. Each retelling added a new sin, a darker shade, until the story no longer belonged to Virginia de Leyva, but to the legend of the Monza nun, half woman, half curse. Behind those stone walls, Virginia lived between two worlds, one of divine punishment, the other of forbidden longing. Gianpaolo Osio still came to her, slipping through hidden doors and secret passages built centuries before for reasons now forgotten. He brought her letters, gifts, and sometimes news from the outside world. But every meeting drew them closer to ruin. For Virginia, these moments were all that remained of her humanity. Beneath the white veil and the silence, she felt alive, loved, desired. seen. Yet each stolen embrace was also a chain, pulling her deeper into darkness. And then came Octavia. She was a young novice, barely 16, newly arrived from a distant town. Her face was pale, her eyes soft with innocence, the kind of purity that reminded Virginia of what she had once been. Perhaps it was pity, perhaps it was guilt, or perhaps it was the need for companionship that led Virginia to take the girl under her wing. At first, Octavia adored her, saw Virginia was kind, protective, a mother within the convent's cold walls, but affection became trust, and trust became entanglement. Virginia's secret world, the whispers, the night visits, the fear, began to close around Octavia like a shadow. Historical documents say that Octavia soon knew too much. She became aware of Ossio's presence and of the secret that still pulsed behind the chapel doors. What happened next has been debated for centuries. Some claim Octavia became part of the conspiracy, that she too fell under the same spell of love and sin. Others claim she resisted, that her innocence threatened to expose everything. Whatever the truth, the end was the same. Octavia died. The official records describe her death as sudden, a fever perhaps, or divine punishment. But those who saw her body whispered of bruises, of marks that told another story. The same pattern repeated. A death that silenced the dangerous, an accident that protected the guilty. 2 young women gone, 2 ghosts haunting the halls of Santa Margherita, and in the centre of it all saw Virginia Maria de Leyva, her hands trembling with prayer and guilt alike. Outside the rumours thickened, servants spoke, confessions were overheard. A letter, written in a bold, accusing hand, reached the Archbishop of Milan, Cardinal Federico Borromeo. Borromeo was not a man easily swayed by gossip. He was one of the strongest pillars of the Catholic Counter-Reformation, stern, incorruptible, determined to purge the Church of scandal. But when he read the letter detailing the sins of the Monza nun, his expression hardened. The accusations were not of mere weakness. They spoke of murder, blasphemy, and corruption inside one of the most respected convents in Lombardy. The cardinal sent investigators. Monza had never seen such a procession. Priests, notaries, guards, all marching under the banner of holy justice. They questioned the sisters one by one. Some wept, some refused to speak, others whispered the truth with trembling lips, eager to free themselves of the burden. The more they uncovered, the darker the picture became. Letters from Ossio, witnesses to secret births, hidden tunnels connecting the convent to the outside world. The name of Caterina, the name of Octavia, both dead, both silenced. When Ossio learned of the investigation, he fled. For weeks he hid in the forest near Monza, aided by loyal friends. He tried to contact Virginia, but she was already trapped in the church's net. Every letter, every attempt to communicate became evidence against them. Eventually he was captured. The trial of Gianpaolo Ossio became a spectacle, the talk of every noble house from Milan to Venice. The court was crowded with spectators, clerics, merchants, and ladies who pretended to faint at every sordid revelation. Ossio denied everything. He swore that his relationship with Virginia was nothing more than rumour spread by envious men. But the evidence was relentless. Letters in his handwriting, servants who had seen him enter the convent at night, witnesses who swore to the existence of a child. The judges had already written the ending. He was sentenced to death, a sentence carried out with brutal precision. Bound in chains, Gianpaolo Ossio was led to the public square. The crowd jeered, some prayed. They watched as the man once known for his beauty and charm was reduced to ashes, his name erased from every noble record. For the church, it was a victory. A demon had been defeated, a scandal buried beneath the ashes. But for Virginia, it was the beginning of her true punishment. The trial of Sor Virginia Maria de Leyva began soon after. Her status as a noblewoman complicated everything. Executing her would anger powerful families. Sparing her would weaken the church's claim to moral authority. And so, the judges sought a cruel balance. She was declared guilty. Guilty of carnal sin, of conspiracy, of the corruption of a holy house. But her life would be spared. Instead, she was condemned to perpetual imprisonment within the walls of another convent, Santa Valeria of Milan. Her sentence was a living death. When Virginia arrived at Santa Valeria, she was no longer the proud daughter of a count or the passionate lover of a man. She was a broken relic of her own story. The church did not place her among the other sisters. Instead, they built a small cell for her, narrow, dark, windowless. A crucifix hung from the wall, the only witness to her final years. She was forbidden to speak to anyone, forbidden to write, forbidden even to attend Mass with the others. Food was passed through a small opening once a day. Her world became silence. It is said that she prayed constantly, sometimes with tears, sometimes with screams. The guards who watched over her cell claimed that at night they heard voices, whispers, cries, words that seemed not entirely human. Some said she spoke to the ghost of Ossio. Others said she argued with God. But whatever she said, the walls of Santa Valeria kept her secrets as faithfully as Santa Margherita once had. Years passed. Seasons changed beyond the iron bars, unseen. Monza moved on, yet the legend of the Monza nun grew larger than life. Painters, poets, and priests alike could not stop retelling her story, each version darker than the last. To some, she was a symbol of lust punished by divine justice. To others, a victim of a patriarchal world that demanded purity from women and indulgence from men. In truth, she was both. And while her body withered in confinement, her name began to cross borders, whispered in confessionals and court salons alike. The tale of Sor Virginia became Europe's favourite sin, one that everyone condemned, yet everyone wanted to hear. Outside her cell they built a chapel. Above its altar, the inscription read, "Here dwells a soul redeemed by suffering." But no one really knew whether redemption had ever come to her. The years turned into decades, and still the cell of Sor Virginia Maria de Leyva remained locked. Time, in that narrow space, was measured not by seasons or calendars, but by the slow erosion of the human voice. Outside, the city of Milan thrived. Merchants filled its streets, carriages clattered over cobblestones, and the world forgot the woman buried alive behind convent walls. Yet within the silence of Santa Valeria, her name refused to die. The sisters of the convent said they could feel her presence, even when she no longer spoke. Some swore that at night they heard a faint whisper echo through the halls, a voice reciting prayers that shifted suddenly into sobs. Others avoided her cell altogether, claiming the air around it was heavy, that her sins lingered like a shadow no candle could banish. To them, she had become something between a warning and a ghost. There are records that describe her final years with chilling simplicity. She was allowed no pen, no paper, no visitors. Only a crucifix carved into the stone wall to remind her of heaven's mercy and her own fall. Her meals were plain, her water rationed, her existence stripped to the barest rhythm of survival. Yet her punishment was not only physical, it was the eternal confrontation with herself. For 43 years she lived like that, a half-century of silence, of reflection, of penance, or madness. Those who saw her near the end described her as pale as parchment, her hair turned silver, her eyes hollow but alert. She still prayed, she still whispered the psalms, but sometimes, the guards claimed, she would stop suddenly, look upward, and murmur as though someone unseen stood beside her. Did she see the face of the man she had loved, or the faces of those who had died because of her? No one knows. The church never cared to ask. When Virginia finally died in 1650, there were no bells for her, no procession, no prayers beyond the minimum required by duty. Her burial took place at dawn, in an unmarked grave within the convent's small cemetery. The church that had once branded her a monster now sought only to erase her, to make her disappearance as quiet as her imprisonment had been. But erasing a sin is not the same as erasing its story. Rumours survived the centuries like embers hidden beneath ashes. They said her cell was cursed. They said the walls were stained with blood where she had scratched words of despair. One legend claimed that, on stormy nights, a woman's voice still echoed from the stones, whispering the names of those she had loved and lost. Perhaps none of that was true, yet it didn't matter. Virginia de Leyva no longer belonged to history, she belonged to myth. More than 200 years later, Her legend would find new life in the hands of the writer Alessandro Manzoni, who transformed the scandal into literature. In his novel I Promessi Sposi, The Betrothed, he recreated her as the Nun of Monza, a tragic figure torn between vows and passion, between holiness and human desire. Manzoni softened her crimes, turned her sin into sorrow, and made her story an allegory of a society that punishes women for feeling what men are allowed to do. His character was not a villain, but a mirror, showing how piety and repression can twist even the purest hearts into instruments of tragedy. Through fiction, saw Virginia's voice returned from silence. Yet the real woman remained locked in the archives, her letters, her confessions, her trial records, all sealed by the Vatican, hidden from scholars for generations. It was said the Church feared reopening old wounds, that revealing the truth would stain the image of divine institutions. But perhaps what they feared most was not scandal, it was recognition. For Virginia's story was never truly hers alone. Across Europe, in France, in Spain, in the German principalities, countless young women were forced into convents for reasons of family honour, politics, or greed. They lived lives not of choice but of command, and when the human heart resisted, when passion, curiosity, or despair broke through, the result was always the same: punishment, shame, erasure. Virginia de Leyva was not exceptional. She was simply visible. Her tragedy became famous because it was documented, because her fall entertained the powerful. But behind every Nun of Monza, there were hundreds whose names were never written, whose stories ended without trial or rumour, whose bodies were buried quietly under stone floors and forgotten. What makes Virginia's tale endure is not the scandal, but the question it leaves behind. Was she a monster shaped by desire, or a victim shaped by oppression? Did her rebellion begin in sin, or in survival? The records, cold and legal, call her guilty. The legends call her cursed. But history, when read without fear, reveals something more human. A young girl stripped of freedom, turned into a saint by force, and into a sinner by consequence. Even today, scholars debate her nature. Some say she was manipulative, capable of cruelty, willing to kill to protect herself. Others say she was driven mad by isolation, by years of being treated as a body without a soul. Between those two versions lies the uncomfortable truth, that both can be real at once. Because oppression does not erase the capacity for sin, it only changes its shape. And perhaps that is why the story of the Nun of Monza still unsettles us. It forces us to see how power, when dressed as morality, can create the very evil it claims to fight. In her time, the Church saw her as a stain to be removed. The people saw her as entertainment, the nobles as scandal, the historians as a warning. But what if she was something simpler? What if she was a mirror, showing that holiness imposed by force becomes a cage, and that even the purest soul will bleed when the heart is not allowed to beat? Centuries after her death, visitors to Monza still ask where she lived, where she prayed, where she sinned. Guides tell them stories of candles flickering by themselves, of cold draughts in empty chapels. The convent of Santa Margherita has changed, its rooms repurposed, its history polished. But if you stand there at dawn, when the mist curls around the stones and the bells begin to toll, you can almost hear the echo of her story, a reminder that faith without mercy is as cruel as sin without remorse. The life of Virginia de Leyva began as a promise to God and ended as a warning to man. Her name became a weapon, a confession, and finally a legend. Yet beneath all the myth, there remains the same small question she once whispered through her cell door. Was I born wicked, or did you make me so? No one ever answered. The bells of Monza ring still, but now they sound less like a call to prayer and more like a memory, a voice from a century that tried to silence its women and a soul that refused to disappear. And perhaps in that lingering echo lies the real truth that shook all of Europe, that holiness without humanity is only another kind of sin.